I needed a faster oscilloscope for an upcoming project, so on eBay I got this LeCroy. Oh, this is a better way to look at it. LeCroy WaveRunner 64Xi-A-N, and it is a 600 megahertz oscilloscope with 10 gigasamples per second, which is actually overkill for what I need, but it's faster than any of the scopes I have right now, or had. Although I don't really have this one because it arrived with an unfortunate fault, even though it was sold as working. So I got it plugged in, and I'm going to hit the power button, see it goes into a diagnostic LED mode, briefly flashes the LEDs. Oh, and now it's showing the boot process. This is not the fault or the behavior it was exhibiting before. Before it was starting up with just a blank screen. The backlight was coming on, the fan was coming on, well, fans, and otherwise the scope would appear completely dead. Well, this is a bit anticlimactic. I guess it's climactic for me because it appears to be working now. We still have to test the front end, of course. Well, okay, well, this is a bit awkward. I was going to demonstrate swapping the CMOS battery on the motherboard because this scope, like a lot from its era, this is from 2013, uses a standard, presumably ATX style motherboard in here. And obviously, as you saw from the startup, it's running Windows XP. So it does just have, all the regular parts and pieces of a computer, as well as the oscilloscope front end. Yeah, it definitely has a BIOS battery. And the seller said he had seen those symptoms before, and it needed a BIOS reset because it lost its settings. But apparently now it got them back. I didn't really get a good look at the BIOS screen, so yeah, I'll have to go back in the video and see what that said. But okay, it's working. Step 2, or what was going to be step 2, was going to be to swap out the hard drive for an SSD, unless someone already swapped it for an SSD, and everyone's one step ahead of me here. So one moment. Oh, wait. Okay, something's definitely loose inside because I just plugged in a keyboard and mouse, and that caused the system to reboot. That's not right. So anyway, as you can see, I've connected an external monitor, which just mirrors a display on the scope. Relatively period appropriate, although I think the monitor actually predates the scope by, well, maybe 7 years or something like that. I should have jumped into the BIOS. Yeah, let's skip disk checking. I'll just need a PS2 keyboard. Or do the USB ports not work for keyboard and mouse? USB ports feel a little, like, sticky. Almost like literally sticky, like they have some kind of residue in them, but I doubt that's the case. It's probably just the feel. Let me try a different keyboard. Well, this keyboard's a little dusty, but should work. Okay, no random reboots. Start menu, brilliant. Celeron 440, 1.86 gigahertz, 1 gig of RAM, which, I guess is enough for this. So I get it's a fairly default setup. Oh, data acquisition devices, that's cool. Disk drives. Oh, there's an SSD, an Intel SSD. Huh. Ugh, sorry, this isn't in dark theme. It's an 80 gig SATA SSD. Can we get... I was hoping to get information from the horse's mouth on this. Oh, there we go. Dark theme. Brilliant. Okay, so there are forum posts going back to 2009 referencing this SSD. So this SSD is pretty old, but at least it's an SSD. Okay. All right, so it's either not a recent replacement. That may be it may have shipped with that SSD. Although 2013 is on the borderline, I would think it would ship with a hard drive. But at any rate, yeah, I wanted to swap what I thought would be a hard drive in here for an SSD, but that's already been done or came from the factory that way. So, yeah, but I am a little concerned that just plugging something into the USB ports caused a reboot. So let me just fiddle with the USB ports, just wiggle them a little. Yep, I barely touched it. I just flexed the port slightly. I mean, I don't know, just to give you an idea, I put maybe like not even enough pressure to move, barely enough pressure to move this keyboard. Like, you know what I mean? Like I barely tapped it and it just rebooted. So there's definitely something wrong here with the motherboard. I've actually never just seen a computer reboot from barely touching the USB port. I'll let it boot up again. What I'm going to do next is, well, actually, if I disconnect it, will it reboot again? Because because I kind of had to wiggle it a little to get it out of the connector. And yeah, that caused a reboot. Really what I want to see is if I tap the ATX cover plate area or tap the USB ports without anything plugged into them, does that cause a reboot? I won't do it while it's booting. I'll do it while it's in that disk checking sequence, because right now it won't be using the hard drive, or the SSD rather. Wiggling the VGA connector? No. So maybe it's just something with one of those USB ports themselves. Because like I'm pushing on the... Oh, wait. Nope, it's booting. Because like I'm pushing on the ports themselves. Turn this around a little more so you can see. Yeah, like I'm just pressing on the ports, like not on the actual cover plate here. And no, it doesn't look like that's causing any issues. So yeah, something with one of the USB... Oh! I think it's reboot. Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely something loose on the motherboard. So yeah, while it's still in the BIOS, before it gets into Windows, let's unplug it and take a look inside. All right, so not the most comprehensive test for this scope, because this is a 30 megahertz function generator and ARB, and obviously a 600 megahertz oscilloscope. This isn't going to really put it through its paces, but at least we can see if the front end's working, and it looks like it is. I mean, it's measuring the correct frequency. The waveform looks relatively stable. I would chalk any instabilities up to this BK precision device rather than the scope. Yeah, I mean, it's measuring about 20 megahertz, about 500 millivolts peak to peak, which is what it should be. Yeah, and set to 1 mega ohm on the inputs. And okay, we're triggering on 1, obviously. This is my first LeCroy scope, so I'm not like super familiar with the interface. But yeah, that's looking okay. I mean, it's measuring on... And these channel 3 and 4 still have these protectors on them, on the connectors, and the connectors really look brand new. They don't look like they have a scratch on them. So, all right, that's a good sign. I'm not going to bother moving the trigger just because it looks well enough. I basically just want to make sure it's going to measure something and see some input on all 4 channels. So the front end, at least the basics of it work. I'll be more concerned with testing it out more thoroughly in the future, but obviously the main concern is the whatever's loose in the motherboard, because that's probably why it wouldn't start up for me when I got it yesterday, because I'm guessing just something was rubbed wrong here, out of place, or just got, it was fairly well packaged, but maybe it got just shaken a little in shipping, and that moved something internally. So what is the correct power down sequence for this? Soft power down? Yeah, okay. Might as well shut Windows down correctly for once. And not something, I don't know if this is normal for this model of scope, but the fan is working really hard on this side and blowing really hot air. In fact, it's quite warm just on the outside of the case, which could be normal, could not be normal. I don't know. Anyway, let's get this thing opened up and just see if there's anything obvious. Obviously, the calibration sticker has already been violated, so we're not worried about that. I'm hoping it's just these 4 Torx screws or star drive screws on the corners to open this up. We'll see. These might just be to hold this back plate on. Okay, well, that's real easy to remove. These weren't torqued down very tight. Ironically, because they're Torx screws, am I right? It's definitely being held on by something else. I'm guessing maybe there's another screw under this plate, or these screws are actually holding it together. Let's just be lazy. Nope, not a... Oh, unless these do go through the case. Yeah. Okay. Ah, open sesame. Not a surprise that there's a bunch of shielding behind that. Ow. This is like... I was exaggerating when I said ow, but it's actually uncomfortable to keep my hand on that. It's not like burning hot, but... No, this isn't reading right because that is a highly reflective surface. But let's see if I can measure something inside. This cover panel probably comes off, and there are some more torque screws on this side and the other side. Let's see where that gets us. And are they the same? Nope, they are smaller than the other torque screws. Ooh, also very loose. All right, it's easy to know which is which. These are fluted. Oh, this one's actually a little tighter. Man, this thing is smoking hot. I feel like that can't be good. Like, that can't be normal. Like my pappy always said, just keep taking out screws till something comes apart. That's always a plus. Oh, okay, hello. Access panel. Okay, here's some black surface. That's not that hot. It's not nearly as warm as the outside of the case, but that's 108 degrees Fahrenheit. 109, 110-ish. I mean, I don't know about that surface, but yeesh. Yeesh, yeesh, yeesh. What is in there? That's probably the power supply. Like, there's no way the power supply should be running that hot. Also, I'm not sure if this is from me opening it, but or from me removing a couple of screws, but there's a screw hole, some threads that don't match up with this hole on the outer metal. And I didn't take that screw out, because I'm guessing that screw should look like this one. So, something's foul there. And that screw did not belong there. I'm 90% sure of that, because this has a fluted head, and this has a flat head on the back of it. So I was going to say I need to remember where these screws go, but I don't think I actually need to remember where they go, because some of them are in the wrong places anyway. I mean, that's like a rookie mistake, because that screw clearly does not even go there, unless they just were reassembling it and ran out of screws. Yeah, there's a screw missing here. Did I take that one out? No, I don't even remember because I got distracted, but... Okay, well, that's moving. Got one more on this side. I think, is this... Oh, I see. Yeah, it does sort of fold out this way. I mean, all these wires are on connectors anyway, so... At least the SSD is pretty accessible. That's cool. It's warm. Everything in here is warm. Very clean, though. Not much dust or anything. Oh, yeah, these run very hot. Fortunately, the motherboard is below that. There weren't any good teardown videos on YouTube, so I'm sorry if this is like the only one, because it's not ideal, because I'm doing this for the first time and not really in a position to show you the best way to do it, I guess. But let's carry on. From what I did find on some forum posts, it looks like the data acquisition board has to come out, which is everything you see here. So, yeah, I'll disconnect stuff. Should be only a couple of screws, it looks like, and one of which are removed already. So this whole board and this the inputs to the oscilloscope should just come out as a unit, and then we can get to the motherboard right below. I think there's another cover in between, but for shielding, we'll see. It does look like these connectors will only fit in one way, and the way the cables are anyway, you wouldn't be able to plug them into the wrong... Well, I guess you could plug this one into the wrong connector, but it's a different size. So no need to mark them or anything. Let's really only go back together one way. There we go. That one's a little tight. And then I pulled off this little connector here too in the process, which was plugged in. Let me zoom in. Which was plugged into this header right here. But again, you can't really confuse that with another cable. And same with this little guy up here. So at least it's pretty easy to disconnect the board from what it looks like. And then we have two ribbon cables up here, which have nice, easy connectors on them. And I think we're good to go. Okay, there's a bunch of screws mounting this to the structure below. And they're also very, very loose. And I think this is one size too small to get a tight fit onto these screw heads. Yeah, that's much better. Yeah, these are identical to some of the screws I took off of the outside of the case. Now, I don't know if that's because previous owner put the wrong screws in the wrong places, or because LeCroy actually did a good job keeping the screws uniform, or at least relatively uniform throughout. This one was nice and tight, so I don't know what's going on here. This is, yeah, it's the same screw. I just hate equipment where it's all different screw lengths and even different threading. No, it's the same. When they're all the same or similar, it makes putting it back together real easy. Taking one out over here. I'm kind of surprised there's no, well, no, not really. I was going to say I'm surprised there's no washers under these, but I guess the washers would be big and would end up impinging on traces around the area, so. And we got a couple down by the bottom here. Sorry for my head sticking in there, but. Okay. Oh, and it looks like this power button just twists and comes out. Yeah. Not that, oh, didn't really get that in shot. The power button, in case you ever need to remove it, twists and comes out like this. I don't think it needs to be removed for this purpose. One more screw on the side here. That holds the front plate, the input plate in. There's another screw on this side, but I'd already taken that out. I don't know if I got them all. Let me just tilt this up towards me. Nope, there's one more hiding down there. Yeah, let me flip this over a little bit. There are some screws on the bottom. This one has a key slot, which is weird. The other two don't. So do they all need to be pulled, or I don't know what the deal is there. And these are a different size and type. They look like similar threading to the other ones, but it's not really in focus. But they have this sort of pan head screw. It's almost like a screw with an integrated washer. Okay, so now that is loose. You know what, this one is in a key slot, so I didn't take it out all the way, but I don't really see the reason not to take that out all the way. Well, I think the screwdriver actually extends. Brilliant. Completely forgot I did that. And good thing it's slightly magnetic. Whoops. Is it just going to come right out? Just get these cables out of the way. I really don't want to damage this thing. Oh, there is another cable in there. Oh, it's the cable for the front USB port. No, that's on a little pin header that I didn't even see. Down in here, let me see. Yeah, I just pulled it out, but this, I believe it looks like a USB cable. I don't know why I'd think that, but there's a USB port right there, so I'm thinking that just feeds directly into that. And looking at the traces, yeah, it seems like that's what it is. Totally did not even see that, so that's well hidden. And I guess it's like, that's why you never want to yank a board out full force. Oh, wider camera. Okay. So there's the data acquisition board. I'll just, it's probably got some, yeah, here's the back of it. So I don't necessarily want to just plop that down on my bench, or table, as the case may be. And I think the motherboard should be right under this cover. You can see this is a separate piece of metal. It's like slightly different finish than this over here, which I believe is the power supply. And are these the exact same screws that were holding down? Yeah, these were the same screws that were holding down the acquisition board. So that's great. Don't have to worry about that. Again, well, there's no way the previous owner had this many of the exact same screw unless they were all the same to begin with. You know what I mean? I mean, this is well put together and nicely shielded. Though I do wish it was easier to get to the motherboard because there is one more screw on the back, which is, well, very, very loose. I don't think I loosened that one. Some of these panhead screws. And that holds this very thin board in place, or thin panel in place. I don't like that. Well, let's see. This cable would have been about there. Okay, I was going to say it looked like it was impinging on the fan, but no. I mean, again, this is immaculately clean. Like, there's no or barely any dust on this fan or under this fan. Oh. Help if I zoomed you guys in. Yeah, see, extremely clean down there. We have a 1 gig stick of Micron PC2 6400U, which is pretty much what you'd expect. It's regular desktop memory. And up here, we have an interface card, which you can see here's the ribbon cables that go to the data acquisition board, and a piezo buzzer, which is weird. Xilinx Spartan FPGA, I assume. Pin header here, and underneath that, I believe, is a standard PCIe slot. It looks like a times 4-lane PCIe slot. Yeah, and the motherboard ends right here. Like, right under this pin header is the PCIe slot, and that's the end of the motherboard where that PCIe slot is. So it's a very small board. Mini ITX, I guess. And yeah, the entire board fits into the frame right now. So here are the USB ports. That one. This one is the taller one, is one with the Ethernet port at the top and then 2 USB ports below. So just to put that in perspective, we were just looking right here at the top of this Ethernet port and these USB headers, and those are the ones where if I tapped them, it would restart the unit, or if I inserted a USB cable. So let's start with the basics and just, I mean, the thing is, they didn't feel loose. Like, when I press on them, they don't wiggle or anything. I just want to see if, as I insert a USB cable, there's any movement inside that we can observe. And by the way, one thing I don't like, this might be hard to show on camera. Yeah, you can see right there. There's an inconsistent gap next to this block of connectors. It almost looks like the case is peeling away, from the connector because it's tighter on the bottom than the top. But even if I push the case in, I have to push in quite a long way to get that gap to be even. And then, as you can see, the case is now like sort of bowed. And so that's not right. So it seems like the geometry is off between this connector and the back of the case, which leads me to believe that something is afoul in the state of LeCroy. Almost like the motherboard isn't mounted properly or something. Although, anyway, so USB cable, this is just from my mouse. And I'm going to hold this from the other side, and yeah, it's like wobbling a decent amount. You see what I mean? Like, that shouldn't move that much. It shouldn't move at all, really, because I'm not providing a lot of force here. It's just enough insertion force to get that in, and that really rocks quite a bit. So could it be that simple? Let's see, is this one nice and solid? Yeah, that one's pretty solid. So could it just be that this is loose, and maybe as it's rocking, I don't know why it would cause the system to reboot though, unless it's like causing a brief short, bringing one of the voltage rails down to 0, and then that's causing it to reboot when the voltage comes back up. And as we already saw, this is a Celeron CPU, nothing fancy, nothing great. And where is the BIOS battery? Because as long as I'm in here, I mean, I am going to change that, because this is a 10-year-old system, and the previous owner said he replaced. Oh, there it is, under this power or under these power cables. The previous owner said he replaced the battery, but who knows how long ago that was, or if he replaced it with a shitty battery. Snips will do in a pinch. Yeah, no pun intended. Whoop. I'm just fat fingering the hell out of this. Let's see. Okay. CR2032. It's Sony branded, which is actually what I have, so, you know, I consider that to be okay. Correction, I have Panasonic CR2032s. I did have Sony's. I just used up the last ones recently and bought these. That's why this package is mostly complete. Did I note the polarity before taking that out? No, I did not. Is the polarity obvious? Yes, it is. Yes, I think it is. Just shove it in there. And just out of curiosity, let's see what the old battery was batterying at. 2.9 volts. I mean 2.95, which is pretty good because these are 3 volt nominal. Although, to be fair, I don't know what these are supposed to be at when they're brand new. I mean, it's 3 volt nominal, so do they start off at 3 point something? Let's get the brand new Panasonic battery back out. Oh, the old battery, as voltage is rising. Well, in any case, the old batteries seem to be good, but we'll stick with a new one just for funsies. Oh, the polarity actually is printed on the board. I just was looking at the connectors for the batteries. So yeah, positive side towards me. Yeah, my guess is that there was a USB cable probably, or it could have been an Ethernet cable plugged into this. Someone either gave it a Bosch from the back or a yank of the cable from the front and bent this slightly backwards. Now, my concern is that if I'm right about the geometry of this being off, the gap between the case and the connector, or the connector package is mounted flush to the motherboard. Again, kind of hard to show, but yeah, I mean, see, it's like mounted properly to the motherboard. So in order for that to be bent that way and still be flush to the motherboard, that means the whole motherboard would be slightly bent, which I guess the motherboard's got to come out, huh? Weird pair of pliers, but let's see. And those just go right back into the power supply. I mean, this power supply has got a lot of connections and probably a lot of rails. Getting into the power supply in any detail, though, is going to be outside the scope of our investigation today. This is, yeah, USB headers. This is the cable I pulled out of the very front of the unit where the USB connector was, and it is marked as a USB header on the motherboard, and it is of course held in there by hot glue, which is great. And the hot glue is covering the connector, or the base of the connector, as well as just being splodged all over a bunch of components on the motherboard. So I don't want to pull that out, and I don't even want to try to like trim the glue off of it, because if I cut between the connector and the glue, that glue could lever downwards, and if it's a component like a resistor or capacitor or something up there, surface mount component, it could end up pulling that component up at an angle, and I would never know because it's still under the glue. And so it all looked normal. So let me not disconnect the USB header cables, because there's also one that goes to the back, I think. This black cable goes to the front panel. Is that a display connector? Yeah, because where else would the display connection be? And it does look like a shielded cable. Also really badly pinched right there. Don't like to see that. But is it marked on the board? JLVDSI. Yeah, that's a display connector. Oh my god, this is super loose. Like, I mean, that just comes right out. But this is... Oh, it looks like it had glue on it at some point. It was probably glued onto the side of the chassis. That might just be for the front power button, because that's the standard, like, PC style, you know, a power LED, power button, reset button, hard drive LED, that sort of thing. That pin header. So, yeah, I mean, everything, these, oh, wait, where's this cable? Yeah, these cables are all disconnected already from other parts of the unit. So these can sort of stay with the motherboard, because whereas this connector does come out, it's also zip tied to this. And I might as well leave everything neatly zip tied and just get the motherboard out. All right. Got a, oh, that's loose. Okay. Well, so that was loose and sort of discolored. I think that's a normal color. It looks like it's a little oxidized, though. But, yeah, that's fine. Really wasn't my plan to dig this far into this scope, but I gotta kind of see what's up with this motherboard. So, again, same type of screw as others to get this PCIe interface card off, which is actually screwed down over here as well. Am I sure? Is there a screw up there? Oh, there is a screw up there. Couldn't see that from my angle. Maybe you could have when I moved the cables before. But that is why it's not budging. Come on. Don't want to damage this thing. This is completely proprietary. Probably made by LeCroy. I think we are going to have to get the fan out because it won't clear the cables on this side and the fan on this side. So, yeah. I mean, this fan is on flobbity rubbery mounts, which I believe don't really want to break these, but worst case, we can put some screws in there. But they're kind of like anal beads for fans. You got to pull them out nice and slow and easy. Okay, fan comes out. Brushless sleeve bearing. 12 volts, 0.16 amps, in case you were curious. And airflow is exhaust, obviously. Okay. I'd make a note of it if it was like intake, but because that would be weird. But exhaust is just the standard way of things. So here is the little FPGA board. So, I mean, again, I'm not really sure why this has a buzzer on it in particular, but part number label and serial number label. And it's not, I thought it was a standard PCIe connector on the motherboard. It's not. So this BNC cable on the back is just going to this connector, which I don't remember where I took it out of. I think it was on the front end. Well, we'll resolve that when I put it back together. And by the way, the SATA connector, or the SATA cable rather, runs under the motherboard and then up over here where it's got a right angle connector going into the board. Fortunately, the motherboard uses the same screws as the data acquisition board and the PCI card, and I'm assuming this is a PCIe bus. I'm just not familiar with that connector offhand, but this screw is like cross-threaded and at about like that angle and not in all the way. So the threads of the screw look okay. Hopefully it's not damaged underneath, or the support pillar is not damaged. Oh, I bet these support pillars here for the PCIe card, for the data acquisition interface card, are holding the motherboard in. Not the right tool for the job, but just got to loosen them up. And just a note, if you use a wrench or a pair of pliers or something to take these out, don't over torque them when putting them back in. I mean, I know I've been complaining about loose screws throughout the chassis, but at the same time, you don't want to over tighten either, because you could very well damage the board. Okay, the board moved as soon as I took that out, so hopefully that heatsink is not really liking me lifting it by that heat sink. It's a bit tight in here. Don't tell me I have to remove the PSU to get the board out. Oh, come on. Yeah, because it won't clear the grommet for the wires coming out of the PSU. Oh, man. Come on, LeCroy. You couldn't make this just like a couple millimeters bigger so that you could get clearance to take the motherboard out without taking the power supply out? I mean, oh, maybe. Now I'm thinking maybe this is how, maybe that connector got damaged this way, because right now, if I pull this anymore, if I get aggressive with this, I could probably clear the PSU. The PSU is a little bit of a lip right here, but I could probably clear it if I pushed it that way, but that would torque this, so I'm really not anxious to do that. So, yeah, I don't want to press on that too much, so let me just leave the motherboard at sort of an angle right now, take the PSU out. Hopefully it's not too much of a faff. Of course, the PSU is held on with the next smallest size torque screws. Are these labeled? This is a T9, in case you're curious. And these should be sequential, I'm guessing, under this bit set. Yes, it was a T10 for the motherboard screws and such. I'm down here, by the way. What else holds this power supply unit in? No, there's probably more, I'm going to guess, on the back side here. Oh, there's a couple more screws. There and there, probably going into the PSU. My concern is, though, if these are the only two things holding the PSU on, as soon as I let these go, it's going to flop back down and hit the motherboard. So let me just, in a rare show of prudence, just tack the PSU back up here. It's out of focus, I apologize, but we'll be flipping this back over in a second. Okay, so I just tacked it in with two screws, one there, so this way it won't fall down if these are the only two screws holding it on. Yeah, we can go to this camera, actually. That's going to be a better view of what's going on here. So, oh yeah, we got some movement. Okay, so let me put this back down. Okay, I think that might be enough to liberate the PSU. This fan and shroud are attached to the PSU itself. So if I move it, you can see that's the PSU module, right? But then there's a little lip here and a lip along here. So you can't just pull it out this way. And obviously there's a lip here too. And like, it doesn't want to lift up because it's hitting this lip here. You see what I mean? Like, I don't want to bend that too far out of the way. And it won't, it's a little too tight in there to come up at an angle. I feel like a LeCroy service tech would have this out in 2 seconds, because there's got to just be like something dumb I'm missing here. The fan is connected to the shroud, not the case, so that's not holding it up. All right, I don't like these brute force electronic components, but this aluminum of the case is pretty flexible. So there's our power supply with its fan and shroud and some internals. Wonderful. The power supply that was running super duper hot. Now, it's got a tested sticker on it, and that is unbroken. So this has not been opened up, at least, so it's all original, which I guess is a plus and a minus, because that means there's 10-year-old capacitors in here, and it's been running extremely hot, so any electrolytics in here could be suffering quite badly. It's not always the capacitor's fault, but yeah. A little bit of schmutz, but again, very clean though. Like, that fan is impressively clean. Enough about the PSU. I really, really was not intending to just take this scope absolutely to bits. Okay, the SATA cable is running underneath. Ew. Yeah, okay. There is some glue residue on it, but it doesn't look like it's actually glued in. It's just super tight. Okay, yeah, it was just super tight. Okay, that's fine. All right, now this is just pretty much a shell. I'm leaving that SATA cable routed through there. Why not? And it's got the feet. So now you know where the underside is. This is the Ethernet USB connector block. I'm just looking for any, damage to the board or bad solder joints or cracked solder joints. To the naked eye, it all looks fine, which leads me to believe there may not be anything unsound outside the connector. What about inside the connector? Then let me get a flashlight. Just maybe one of the the pins in there is bent weirdly or something. I don't know. No, I mean, it's too glary. Not seeing any real obvious damage inside the connectors. All right, well, yeah, I didn't see anything mechanically wrong with the USB ports. All right, the next thing I'd like to do is take a look at those solder joints under the microscope. Okay, so I got the Andon Star microscope. I only laugh because it was like every single YouTuber in the world, well, every technical YouTuber was shilling these for a while. I am not shilling it. It's okay. It's not bad. It's just I'm not getting paid to say anything good about it, but it is pretty good. And usually I would feed this from HDMI via HDMI directly into my video switcher, but I don't think for this purpose that's going to be necessary. Is this board too tall for that to focus on? Maybe I'm rethinking my compliments to the Andon Star microscope. Well, apparently, yeah, that sucks. Apparently the microscope can't focus that close, but yeah, so everything's out of focus slightly, but I can kind of get an idea if there's any cracks or problems with the solder joints. So here we are on, I think that's the end of the board, yeah. That's one of the mechanical pads that just holds the housing of that connector in place. That's probably a grounding connector and mechanical support. I mean, the solder doesn't look great. It's just like a loose solder joint in of itself, though, shouldn't cause the system to reboot. That would cause lapses in USB connectivity. I would only really be concerned if there's a short between two pins, which even out of focus, hopefully we'd be able to see. And I mean, I could meter all these points to see if there's continuity between them, but it seemed to be a really intermittent fault. And it wasn't even like if I held the USB ports in, it would stay in a rebooting state. It's like if I would tap it, it would reboot, but if I would hold it, they'd still just reboot. So I don't think I'm gonna be able to simulate the fault. My hope here was kind of just that I'd open this and find some nonsense down here, some kind of problem, and just be like, oh yeah, that's why this pin is bent over, and at certain positions it's just barely making contact. But I'm not seeing anything obvious, where I was hoping that I'd get into the case and see that the motherboard was mounted improperly and was sort of at a weird angle where maybe it was touching something. I mean, it could be completely unrelated to this connector, by the way. I mean, it could just be I'm pressing on this connector, that's flexing the motherboard slightly. There could be a fault somewhere over here in the motherboard, or even over here if that's flexing it enough. Or it could have been something with the mounting that I didn't even notice, where when I press on here, it causes the board to flex like this, which causes this part to bow down, which maybe was hitting a piece of metal on the bottom of the board. I don't know. This is a really hard fault to diagnose without anything obvious showing up. MD, that's a label maker label if I ever saw one. I was never a fan of these type of connector blocks because the Ethernet port is so high that anytime the Ethernet port gets any kind of strain, I mean, think about the leverage that's being transferred down to the board. And I mean, even now though, you can see, is that just a trick of the eye? What I'm trying to see is that square. No, that is questionably square to the motherboard. I can't get a square on here to check it because it's got all these solder connections and surface mount components there. So yeah, it looks like it is canted back away from the board though, but the board and solder joints aren't showing any sign of damage, so it can't be. Like maybe the whole board is bent. Yeah, the board is not straight, actually. That's not good. Let's see if I can get this show up from the camera's perspective. Yeah, see, like the board is definitely bowed, right? What about this side? Oh, yeah. Ooh. Yeah, the board is definitely bent up. Slightly. But yeah, the inflection point is right about here. And the board is most assuredly bent upwards after that point. So that could cause any number of faults. But it's a very slight bend, so it's not like obviously cracked or anything. But that, you know, that could strain or damage any one of these traces, either on the surface or internally, because this is undoubtedly like, I don't know, 8+ layer board. So, ugh. All right, let me make a note of that, because I may just have to start looking for a replacement board. Damn. Part number, revision, and let's get just one good shot of the board centered in frame so that if I go looking for one, I can definitely see whether it is a match physically. All right, well, hopefully there'll be a follow-up to this video. Consider this a part 1, I guess, because, yeah, this board is definitely mechanically damaged ever so slightly. I could put it back in the scope. It would probably work for the most part, but my concern is that it's not going to work forever and it's not going to work reliably. So if I can get a new motherboard that's an exact match for this, I mean, even if it has slightly different connectors on the back, if I get a new ATX shroud or shield with it, or bezel, cover plate, weirdly, I don't actually know what that's called. I just have installed a ton of them in my life. You know, I could always get a new one of those to go along with the new motherboard, as long as, you know, it doesn't matter if the external ports are a little bit different, as long as everything internally is basically in the same place. And, you know, to be fair, it looks like in the chassis, even though things were tight around the motherboard, there was a lot of room on top of the motherboard, relatively speaking, a lot of room. So even if like the RAM is in a slightly different location, the CPU is in a slightly different location, it's a slightly different revision of that board, as long as like the power connector, particularly for sure the PCIe connector, that's really it. I mean, otherwise everything is just connected with fairly variable length wires, so shouldn't be a major issue. So hopefully I can find a replacement board and put this back together and get that working. Because usually there's absolutely nothing on the motherboard itself that is particular to the scope or the manufacturer of the scope or proprietary in any way. But yeah, part 2 hopefully will be replacement motherboard and a working scope. So I'll see you then. Thank you, and if you enjoyed this, please subscribe and all that YouTube stuff that I would appreciate. All right, well, that was a bunch of horse shit because I didn't think that board would be bent. Oh, this disk is full. That's not good. Is that frozen? Oh my god, nothing's working here. One of my recorders is frozen.